Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward. Chapter 92. The caravan rumbled on. Kayana could see the dust rise above them in thick clouds, making vision of where they had come all but impossible. She craned her head, looking from where the high vantage point of the driver's cart. The two horses seemed to be doing well, but they were tired, it was clear. Rest would do them all well. It would be a calculated risk, Kayana knew. Part of her screamed to get to cover before setting up camp. To just be completely naked out here, open to the elements, was so difficult for her to accept. But the horses needed rest and water, and Kayana teetered on the edge of exhaustion. If they were overtaken from behind, they would need to rouse her quickly. It still may not matter. She would sleep next to the heavy bronze blade, hoping the others would have the wisdom to wake her. She could feel the rushing sound in her ears that came when the total and utter exhaustion swept over her. She turned to the flap that had separated the back of the wagon from the driver's cart, beckoning to Millie. "Please, Millie, come take the reins. Take us beyond that ridge ahead." She gazed at the young woman, giving her full attention. "Can you do it?" Millie looked uncertain, but nodded once. It was enough. She trusted the child now. After what they had been through, she had witnessed Millie's courage. Kayana held the reins and passed them silently to the other young woman, a look of appraisal entering her eyes. Giving Millie's hand a squeeze, she let go and lay back. The world blurred and gave way before her head touched the wood. Isolated clouds billowed all around Kayana, swirling in patterns that rushed by her too quickly to discern. She could hear the surf beckoning beyond, the gentle lull of the tide tugging at her relentlessly. She stood there, watching the shapes swirl and form around her before being blown apart by an unseen hand. She rose carefully into one of her poses, Silva Kadar. Her legs were bent, slightly parted, and her hands rested at her sides. This was the universal stance, the first stance she had ever learned. From this stance, all others could be reached. Kayana swayed slightly. Her tutor stood before her, Nazan, powerfully built and serious. He moved silently, correcting her stance. Her lips parted as she waited for the signal to begin the next move. To wait, absolutely calm, not letting any stray thought deter her from her training. This moment would allow her to take the next pose to the best of her ability. Hopefully, it would meet his silent judgment. His worn face was severe in the blinding light, but there were shadows that covered his face. She could not fully make him out. "Again, Kayana." His low tenor voice cracked like a whip. She blushed, trying to refocus on her training, trying to empty her mind to the point of readiness, the point where light became flesh. The prophet of her people had spoken deeply of this heightened state, where one could react to any exterior force easily, like flowing water. Kayana focused her mind on a single point, a blazing star she had seen as a child. It was her takal, her unique mantra, that allowed her to sink deeper into her training. When she truly focused her takal, she could see the next move she should make like a map opening up before her. The next perfect move. Einshan. He broke through her focus in an instant. She wavered. Her love for him had slowly built. She found his shy demeanor spoke to her heart. She wanted to spend time with Einshan, the young man she had grown up with, but who had never spoken with her before. She watched him when her training broke for a moment. She longed to hear his words, to know his heart's feelings. "Tenshet!" An angry shout erupted from her teacher. She had been rebuked for not following the takal. Kayana wept openly, proud of her tears. Again, her teacher would give no reprieve. Kayana's muscles already burned from the strenuous labor of the exercise. 4 hours had slipped by and the sweat streamed off her lithe body. Her strong hands held her in place, barely. The knots of corded muscle tightened as she maintained her handstand. The wind shifted cruelly, pressing on her back, Then her sighed as her muscles strained to keep herself aloft. A strong push from Nazan almost knocked her down, but she again pulled her legs aloft for perhaps the 40th time. She would not be rebuked again. Einshan. Kayana focused harder. Hating her teacher was a commonly accepted practice. Any edge that could be taken in the training was worthy of consideration. The school had no qualms about the methods, so long as the results came forward. Kayana gritted her teeth. 3 more hours. The tight muscles of her stomach rippled again when the push came again, harder this time. She let out a small whimper, but struggled on. The hours bled on. Kayana had never hated her teachers. She understood what they sought. They sought perfection, and she was the piece of clay they used to shape their desires. Kayana screamed a primal howl of triumph. Alone, the training was at an end, until tomorrow when it would begin anew. Each day must be celebrated as a success, she knew. Her teacher was gone. Kayana knew he would have reprimanded her if he had been unhappy with her progress. The silence that met her was his resounding joy. She smiled in the setting sun. Einshan would be there, somewhere. She would go to him. Would he wait? Perhaps he still argued on with the great philosophers. Kayana wanted to know him, to share in his joy, to be his happiness. But more than anything, she wanted to complete her training. She looked out longingly to the fading magenta sky. She felt her arms quake with exhaustion, and felt giddy at what she was accomplishing. Wistful, she returned to the village, thinking of the great sweat lodge, and clearing away the dirt and sand from her body. Her supple figure cast a long shadow as she slowly walked on bruised feet, returning once more to the school. Kayana stirred lightly as the dust whipped by, the wind rising from the further the caravan went out into the open stretch of desert. The dream faded away like a cloud being burned off in the midday heat. She smiled fondly at the memory. Millie or Irna must have tucked her into the back of the wagon. The shade was wonderfully welcome. She could see through the light flap that separated the driver's cart from the body of the caravan. Millie sat with a steady focus at the reins. She sat very still, trying to compensate for any changes in the pull of the 2 horses that led them on. She had been forced to learn through necessity, but Kayana was thankful for Millie's aptitude for driving the wagon. They were now almost completely equidistant from any brush or cover. They traversed the center of the great sea of sand, reminding Kayana of a great plain spreading out before them. Millie would see them to the next rise. Feeling the heat, she slipped back into a pleasant sleep, the rolling dunes lulling her back into dream.